So every year, World PR Day is celebrated on July 16th. But today, Global Media Alliance has gathered us together to celebrate this day even ahead and to begin to set the right steps to make things better when it comes to PR communications. Thank you very much for honoring our invitation. We'd like to recognize and appreciate everyone that is here. However, would want to recognize the presence of Honorable Fatimatu Abubakari. She's the Deputy Minister for Information here in Ghana. Put your hands together for her. We have the CEO of Global Media Alliance Group in the person of Mr. Ernest Boateng. Let's appreciate him. And we also have Emma Wenani. She's the Chief Director of Global Media Alliance. Let's also recognize the presence of Mr. Gayheart Mensah. He's the lead consultant of Komskraft. And also recognize the presence of Akua Owusu-Nartey. She's the Regional Managing Director, Ogilvy Africa. You're welcome. And let's also recognize the presence of Deborah Kwablah. She's the Corporate Communications and Public Affairs Manager for Nestle Ghana. Thank you very much. So now that we have an understanding of why we are here, we want to believe that at the end, we'll all be fired up and ready to have these PR conversations even within our space and beyond. To kick off, we're taking our welcome address, and that will be taken by the CEO of Global Media Alliance. Let's make welcome Ernest Boateng.
Madam Guest Speaker, Deputy Minister of Information, Honorable Fatimatu Abubakar, our esteemed invited panelists, colleague agency CEOs, PR practitioners and industry players, friends from the media, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to welcome you today as we join the world to celebrate World Public Relations Day 2022. Launched in 2021 to forge a global agenda about PR, World PR Day has witnessed participation from thousands of practitioners, organizations, and individuals across the globe within a short period of time. This is a testament to the reality that PR and proper communications is being recognized as a catalyst from transformation across the world. This morning's event is very significant because it is the first ever thought leadership event in Ghana to mark PR Day. And we applaud ourselves for being part of history. Ladies and gentlemen, the public relations profession has significantly contributed to building society and fostering proper governance and mutual relations between stakeholders, be it government institutions, both private and public, and the general public. We believe that this World PR Day, which will be an annual event, will ignite industry conversations on how relevant and important the use of public relations and proper communication tools are to our society, especially in Ghana and the world at large. The bitter truth is that people still see PR as a spin game and don't see the real value of public relations in communications and in governance. Going with the theme for this year's celebration, trust, truth, and transparency, it is important that PR practitioners abide by the ethics of the profession. It's okay. As we mark the second World PR Day, let us throw more spotlight on the strength and potential of the profession, as well as the utilization of new tools and trends and value propositions within the industry. Permit me at this point to commend the team at Global Media Alliance for putting together this wonderful event. I also want to applaud all guests for honoring our invitation. I would like to also use this opportunity to express appreciation to the Institute of Public Relations Ghana, my colleague CEOs from the PR world, Business and Financial Times, and all stakeholders present for supporting this event. It is my hope that this event will lead to efforts in building a unified global agenda towards enlightening the world on the role of PR and good communications to make Ghana and the world in general a better place. In PR, they teach us not to talk too much and to make sure that you keep your message short and sweet. So I'll take my own advice and end here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you and welcome once again.
Group GMA is a focused, integrated media and entertainment company with over 20 years of experience and serving an average of 100 clients a year. GMA over the period has served clients across various industries from fast-moving consumer goods, banking, telecommunications, mining, real estate, hospitality and tourism, public sector, non-governmental organizations, and won many awards, including the coveted Golden World Awards from IPRA, PR Consultancy of the Year 2016, from the Institute of Public Relations, IPR, International Award for Excellence in Corporate Communication in 2019 by IPRA. GMA was the Innovative PR Agency of the Year 2018, with the most recent award being the Public Relations Consultancy of the Year 2020 at the Institute of Public Relations Ghana Excellence Awards and Presidential Bowl at Akosombo. GMA, as the foremost PR consultancy in Ghana, joined the world to celebrate the first ever World PR Day on July 16, 2021 with a myriad of activities. This year, 2022, GMA is again joining hands with public relations practitioners across the world to celebrate the second World PR Day. The day seeks to establish a unified global agenda to make the world understand and utilize the PR profession better.
Thank you very much for your attention. Please, let's put our hands together for Global Media Alliance Group. So this and more is what has been achieved for over 20 years. And standing here before you, I'm also a living testimony. I joined Global Media Alliance as a baby PR practitioner. But today, I have been groomed for almost a decade within the group to become one of the game changers when it comes to conversations around African women through African Women's Voices show. And I'm so, so grateful for that. We are going to be having our keynote address, and that is going to be handled by our Deputy Information Minister. Please, let's stand up and put our hands together and make welcome Honorable Fatimatu Abubakari. Thank you very much. It's not loud enough anyway. Women, let's do it better. Thank you.
The CEO of Global Media Alliance, Mr. Ernest Boateng, permit me to stand on further protocols and say good morning to you all for joining us for this all-important program. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I bring you compliments from the Ministry of Information, especially from my boss and minister, Honorable Kojo Opon Nkrumah, who would have loved to join us, but was caught up in some equally important engagement out of the capital. Let me start by expressing my sincere gratitude to Global Media Alliance for organizing this event. I would also like to express my deepest appreciation and gratitude to all industry stakeholders, including students, for supporting this event, to reflect on the important role and impact that public relations has played in government and in businesses. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I believe you will agree that this is an opportune time and platform to reflect on the critical role that PR has played in contributing to the overall national development agenda of this country. ladies and gentlemen, public relations, as we all know, is an essential ingredient in building relationships, preventing crisis, and achieving business objectives, pushing national interests, and preventing the kind of confusion that could ruin a company or lead nations to war. The celebration of World PR Day offers an opportunity for all public relations professionals to spearhead the right conversations and better position the industry. It also accords PR professionals an invaluable opportunity in ensuring the needed progress is ascertained. The theme Trust, Truth, and Transparency, which is the theme for this year's World PR Day, presents another opportunity for professionals to put forward a unified global agenda to further elevate the industry. Ladies and gentlemen, trust, truth, and transparency have become popular in government demands as citizens seek to be aware of what is real and true. People have grown tired of surprises and just want to exist in an environment that allows one to have greater clarity of thought by eliminating the unknown that continue to creep into their minds with each decision they make or relationship they foster. It is against this background that I believe it is very important for organizations and events organizers or governments to make use proper PR strategies in management. Allow me to say that government has over the years ensured that trust, truth, and transparency are adopted in sustainable development. The government is committed to creating a high level of openness in its governance. We have to work together to ensure public trust and establish a system of transparency, public participation, and collaboration. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, there is a need for transparency in government activities to help promote accountability and provide information to citizens. It is for this reason that government in 2019 passed the Right to Information Law, which allows citizens to have access to public documents and information, except when such information are exempt. Again, in September last year, government through the Ghana Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative and its partners launched Ghana's Opening Extractive Program, OEP, to, among other things, advance the beneficial ownership transparency program in the country. This initiative is part of efforts to address corruption risk and enhance transparency in the business climate of this country. Ghana is among 9 countries globally piloting this initiative with the collective aim of tackling corporate opaqueness. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, the global spread of the coronavirus was accompanied by a wave of misinformation and disinformation that was undermining policy responses, such as adherence to COVID protocols and vaccination, and amplifying distrust and concern among the citizens. Government's leverage on public communication to counteract misinformation, and support policy. The efficacy of these actions depended on grounding them in open government principles, chiefly transparency, to build trust in public relations. These are some interventions made by government to ensure that trust, truth, and transparency are employed as an essential ingredient in effectively managing the country. I stand before you today, ladies and gentlemen, as the Deputy Minister of Information, representing the foremost PR machinery of government responsible for the dissemination of government's development communication. As part of our core mandates, the Ministry, through the Information Services Department, ensures that feedback in respect of reaction to government policies and actions is brought to the attention of government for quick response to help solve problems facing the citizenry. The Ministry exists to facilitate free flow of adequate, timely, and reliable information and feedback between government and the public for socio-economic empowerment and enhanced democratic citizenship. Among other things, over the past 1 year, the Ministry of Information has also introduced some complementary programs, such as the Amplified platform, to provide spotlight to promising startups, social courses, and mentorship platforms by offering PR consultancy and shooting free professional documentaries to these startups so that we can provide the spotlight for them to prosper. As we mark World PR Day, it is also imperative for all PR professionals in the country to uphold professionalism, honor, and respect in the discharge of their duties. This will serve as a way of motivating other prospective PR managers. I urge all PR professionals in the country to take up the challenge in ensuring that trust, truth, and transparency are employed in all their endeavors. Ladies and gentlemen, let me once again congratulate the organizers of this event to mark World PR Day in Ghana, Global Media Alliance, for this wonderful initiative. I believe they deserve a round of applause. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for being part of this event. May God strengthen us to do more for our organizations and our country. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Thank you very much, Honorable, and we look forward to doing the best of the best for our organizations and our country, as you have advised. So please, may we also recognize the presence of the President of IPR, Mr. Mawuko Afadzinu. Let's acknowledge his presence. He's here. Please, if you can come forward for us. Thank you. So we are about to get into the panel discussion. But we'd like you to really know the people that will be leading this conversation. So stay glued to your seats as we play their profiles.
Emma Wenani. Emma Wenani is a communications professional, public relations, digital marketing, project management, and events management, with over 10 years of experience working in different capacities at senior management level in many consulting and media firms. Emma currently oversees the communication unit for Global Media Alliance Group as its chief director, leading her teams in providing strategic and objective advisory services to the clients they work with. The team currently works with and services clients in the telecommunication, banking, agriculture, non-governmental, nutrition, government, technology industries, amongst others. Emma Wenani. Gayheart Mensah. Gayheart is a PR and communication professional with over 3 decades of experience in the field. He started his career as a journalist with the Ghanaian Times and also worked with the Daily Graphic and the Evening News. He was a pioneering member of the GTV Breakfast Show in the 90s and also a pioneering panelist of Joy FM's flagship program, Newsfile. He has held senior positions at Unilever as PR manager, at Barclays Bank Ghana Limited as communications manager, at Tala Oil as head of corporate communication and investor relations, and at Tullow Oil plc in London as external affairs and communications manager. He also worked as director of external affairs and legal for Vodafone Ghana. Gayheart has been an adjunct lecturer in PR and communication at the University of Professional Studies, Accra, and was also lecturer in various courses at the postgraduate program at the Ghana Institute of Journalism. In 2016, he was adjudged the best PR practitioner in Ghana by the Institute of Public Relations and was also recognized as one of the 50 best marketing and communication professionals in West Africa in 2017. Gayheart is currently the CEO of Komskraft Consult, a communication consultancy he set up 2 years ago. He has handled clients like the Speaker of Parliament, the Canadian government, the University of Ghana, and the Ministry of Food and Agriculture. Gayheart. Akua Owusu-Nartey. Akua is a creative thinker. Her true self-expression is apparent through her deep interest in gastronomy, creative writing, child development, and empowering business professionals. Since 2005, Akua has been a marketer, developing campaigns to promote products, services, and ideas. Akua moonlights as an educator, empowering teams with new skills around strategy, brand development, personal branding, selling, presentation skills, and leadership in this new age. Today, she is a strong change advocate, driving business transformation in partnership with key clients like Cosmos Energy, Vodafone, European Union, Twitter, Coca-Cola, Diageo, Bolt, UNICEF, Visa, etc., who are committed to people development, social change, business innovation, and growth on the continent. Currently, her team at Ogilvy Ghana is made up of 51 talented people whose expertise cut across creative, strategy, digital, PR, and media functions. This team works with a client portfolio across West and Central Africa in categories covering beverage, technology, finance, FMCG, telco, NGO, oil and gas, banking, etc. The diversity of the team, their experience, collaborative nature, and professionalism makes them a force to reckon with in the industry. As an empath, teacher, digital enthusiast, and innovator, Akua looks towards the future with optimism. People and things evolve daily. Don't fight it. Akua Owusu-Nartey.
I'd like to invite Deborah, who is the Corporate Communications and Public Affairs Manager at Nestle Ghana. Thank you so much, Deborah. And I'd like to invite Mawuko Afadzinu, who is joining us. He's the current IPR Ghana President. You're welcome, Mawuko. Thank you so much. So I believe we can begin. So good morning again. My name is Emma Wenani. I'm the Chief Director at Global Media Alliance, and I'm honored to be the moderator for today's panel discussion. We're going to have a wonderful conversation with my colleagues in the industry, people I've looked up to, people I work with, and afterwards we're going to open up the floor to questions. I know we have a number of my colleagues in the industry, from agencies, from government. We also have students from communication universities. And please do write your questions. At the end of the day, we'll open up the floor to all the questions. So welcome again and good morning. Maybe let me start. Our MC Eunice mentioned that this is the second year we are celebrating World PR Day. As communication experts, could you let us know what this day means to you? Why do you think it's important to celebrate World PR Day? And then also, what do you think we can get out of it, especially people who are coming up in the industry? Perhaps we can start with Mawuko, and then we come down.
Thank you very much. It's intriguing that we ask that question, because now more than ever, globally, the whole world is in a state of flux. And you can pick any country anywhere. It's nearly as if the things that held us together, the very essence of society, the values that brought us together and made us strong are all being tested. And at the heart of that is the question of trust, is the question of shared value, underpinned by quality relationships. Because societies globally are defined by relationships. And it cascades across all the various tiers and levels. So you look at societies, you look at communities, you look at companies, you look at institutions. The core element that holds everything together is the quality and the value of the relationship that you offer. And that's what PR represents. PR essentially is a management function that says that how do you get relationships that people value, relationships of importance, relationships that merit the effort to nurture and curate. And once you miss that, you miss the basis of the whole establishment. You miss the core element that brings you together and that holds you together. And so if there is a single day to bring our focus on this very important magnet that holds us together, that day is very important, particularly in times like this, when there is so much flux and there is so much uncertainty around us. It allows us to focus on the core element that holds companies, communities, countries, and indeed the whole world together. That's why it's important we celebrate World PR Day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mawuko.
All right, thank you, my president. Now, just to recap the question, I think the question sought to find out what our preliminary comment is on a day like this. Yes. I'll start by saying I feel awful, but I also feel optimistic. I feel awful because, look, we belong to a profession that is good at building the image and reputation and perceptions around individuals and organizations. But as a professional body, we have failed in positioning the negative notions and perceptions about PR. And that is why I feel awful. And then it moves me into optimism. Institutionalizing a day like this, I think, gives us the opportunity to try to right those wrong notions and perceptions about this profession. I think ours is a noble profession. Noble to the extent that if you look at what CEOs do in an organization, if you look at what politicians do, it is, in essence, an exercise in public relations. It is about brand building. It is about communicating for the CEO, both internal and external. It's about advocacy. It's about building relationship. It's about identifying and driving purpose within an organization. These are the things that we do as CEOs. These are the things that we do as politicians. And so I am happy that at least we have started the process, started last year, at trying to create a lot more understanding of what we do as PR practitioners in order to reposition this profession the way it ought to do. It ought to be. And so from being awful, I am now in a mood of optimism. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayheart.
Hi. So I think that in most professions, we take care of other people and we don't take care of ourselves as much as we should. And I think you alluded to that. And it's almost like everybody has a birthday and you don't have a birthday of your own. And so you've been around for centuries and you don't celebrate yourself. For me personally, I think it's long overdue. And it's absolutely incredible that we begin to build the foundations of a community that has a day that celebrates it. It gives you the opportunity to have the conversations, whether positive or negative, about the things that plague the industry and the things that the industry is winning at, right? And I think that if the dentists have their day and if the lawyers have their days and doctors have their days, then PR practitioners should have their days as well, because there is so much that they do, almost like unsung heroes, all the kinds of crises that they manage and things that they kind of work through on a daily basis. So for me, it's baby steps, but giant steps as well. Mm-hmm. And I hope that as an industry, we work in service of making sure that we continue this and kind of build the credibility within our industry.
Thank you, Akua.
For me, this is very uplifting, and my earlier colleagues have mentioned the importance of the day and the fact that as professionals, we have helped to build organizations, we've helped to manage and build trust within our organizations. And so even though it's at the beginning, we should be happy that we have started and will be able to continue. And cheers to Global Media Alliance, because sometimes when you institute international days, it takes a while before we start celebrating them. This was instituted last year, and look at us today. We are here in this forum, very important forum with professionals, with students, and we are here to celebrate. So we've started well, and I believe that looking at the way we've started, we'll build on it and celebrate this very important day, because as we all know, we play very critical roles within our organizations and within this nation, and it is just right that we celebrate what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Let me continue with you, Deborah. Earlier, Gayheart alluded that the PR profession is often misunderstood. We've had several myths about what PR is, what it is not. Could you let us know, in your opinion, what really is public relations and what is it not?
Well, I think very simply, public relations is applying the communication tools or applying the communication principles to build trust. And the theme is really apt: to build trust, to be truthful, and to be transparent. Trust building is a very important component of public relations. And we do this employing the communication principles. Here we sit today, and it looks like when it comes to our work, we tend to show more the, if you like, the mechanic side of our work rather than the vehicle manufacturer side of our work. I'll explain. So you tend to see more public relations professionals when there are issues or crises within the organizations. This is when everyone is trying to find you and everyone is asking you to make a statement. So we've become mechanics and fixing issues and dealing with issues. But can we rewrite the narrative? We know that's not all that we do. We do much more than that. Mm-hmm. The responsibility is ours to rewrite the narrative and start positioning ourselves as vehicle manufacturers. What does that mean? Strategy is key. So how do we plan? How do we put the various pieces together into the beautiful tear rubber vehicle that we see, that when you put on the streets of Accra, you'll be proud to drive? Okay, that's really who we are. But have we really told the story of who we are as PR professionals? So I'll leave it here, and then we'll put more on it later. But I like to look at it as, how do we rewrite the narrative from being a mechanic to becoming a vehicle manufacturer? Strategy, design, planning, execution, and doing detailed execution to the vehicle that we see. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any of my panelists want to add anything on that?
So, growing up, for me, PR was media relations, right? It was pretty much, what's the press release? What journalists do you know? Who can get your story out there? And having worked in advertising for the last 17 years, I always thought the PR department was like, you know, if you have a press release, give it to the guys, they'll send it out. Today, it's very far from that, right? It's a core part of any business today. And it's about branded PR. It's about how you're positioning yourself as an organization. And I think more and more importantly, it actually, beyond just the brand, it uplifts the face of the organization. Yesterday, Emirates put out a release on something that's going on with them with London Heathrow. And it was very, very different from the normal tone that Emirates will have as an airline. It was very, very strong. It was very, very, I think you should all read it. It's a very lovely read because it kind of shows speaking truth to power. But what that taught me was that the days of just it being a press release and getting your story out there, it's over. It's about the strategic thinking that Deborah alluded to. It's about a business taking a stance and a position, and how you communicate that stance and position in a way that is authentic to the business, is truthful to the business, but at the same time drives empathy and a connection with consumers. So for me, PR is beyond the press releases. So forgive me, I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's also now a very integral part, and we're making a difference. That's what I would say.
True.
I choose to look at PR as that exercise that mines organizational relationships for purposes of delivering value to the organization. And so it's about what is the ecosystem of the organization, and what do you do as a PR person using strategy, using truth, trust, and transparency to enhance those relationships in such a way that it feeds into the bottom line of your organization. For me, broadly, that is what PR is. What is PR not? PR is not that quadruple whammy of perceptions that seem to rather detract from what we do. You all know we are in the days of quadruple whammy. So quadruple whammy is not only in the economy, quadruple whammy is also in PR. And what do I mean by the quadruple whammy? PR is not spin doctrine. That is the first of the quadruple. PR is not propaganda. Neither is PR an exercise in telling lies. And the last one, the PR profession or PR professional is not that sleazy person that we are thought of. And so these are the things that seem to rather define what we do, when in actual fact, there's a lot more that we bring to the table, like ensuring that organizations are able to achieve the objectives through the strategy that we put together, the objectives that they set for themselves.
Mawuko, you may.
Yes. Just trying to bring down the conversation to a very simple level, the level at which I relate to it. And I guess my pastor will be happy if I give this example. But my mind goes all the way back to two stories in the Bible. When Madam Honorable Deputy Minister, both stories are about women. So there is the story of Rebecca, who meets a group of men he doesn't know, and they ask her for water. And she says, I'm going to give you water, but I'm also going to give water to your camels. Now, within a short space, she was able to identify the essence of that relationship and what was of value in that relationship. And she executed on both. Then there is a story of another lady, I believe the name is Abigail, who apparently, according to the Bible, had a terrible husband, very typically like most of us men, hot-tempered. Now, his responses to the entreaties of David were the antithesis of what we call good PR. But Abigail's response mirrored somebody who understood the value of relationships and the elements of value in that relationship. Those for me are the two components. Number one, that there is a relationship of importance. And number two, that you understand the key drivers of importance and value in that relationship. And you apply the tools of communication, as my colleague said. Over and beyond that, you apply the right management principles to ground the relationship you consider important in a way which is not just sticky, but magnetic. Build on trust, build on a clear sense of shared values, and ensuring that all the parties consistently and continuously benefit from the quality of that relationship. That is public relations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I believe we've really broken down, in essence, what public relations is. We've moved on from just being people who are constantly running after journalists to give them press releases to publish for us, from being people just writing editorial, to being strategic professionals who deal with how can a company better position themselves. Now, one of the areas where PR professionals tend to be looked for is crisis management. So this is to you, Akua. The last 2 years, for example, with COVID-19 have been quite the new normal. There's been a lot that companies have gone through. There's been a lot that people, personalities, brands have gone through. And there's been some crises that we had to manage. As a professional and somebody who works in the agency side of the business, what do you think are some of the important skill sets for PR professionals to employ when it comes to crisis management?
So before I get into the skill set conversation, I will comment on the fact that PR carried a lot of us through the pandemic. Just even from communicating and educating the consumer and people, ordinary people, but more importantly, being that tool that brands use to connect with their audiences. Mm-hmm. When I think today about what PR practitioners need, I think 3 things jump at me, especially within a crisis scenario or even a problem-solving scenario. I think the first thing is having a problem-solving mindset. Very often we get stuck in, oh, this is the problem, oh, this is the problem, this is the problem, without necessarily wondering, how do I resolve these problems, right? So the first thing is, and it's a mindset more than even a skill more than something that you learn, right? You have to actually be intentional about it. So the first thing for me is as individuals or practitioners, what's your mindset? Are you looking for the solutions? Are you one who's always trying to find, how do we turn this around? How do we make this better? So that's the first thing. The second thing is writing. So it's interesting you're asking me about crisis management and skill sets and so on, because I just took a course with Holt Business School on crisis management. And literally, you're given 15 minutes to put a press release together. 15, I kid you not, right? And there's a briefing, and it says you need to be on air in 15 minutes, and you're writing. And I think that English is a beautiful language, and very often we just piece words together, and often they are quite meaningless, right? So being able to actually practice how you write and be able to send messages that are not ambiguous and put out messages that have a clear message, but at the same time show empathy and connect with audiences is a skill. It doesn't happen overnight. And it's something that requires practice and something that requires you actually being intentional about. So that would be the second thing for me. Mm-hmm. Lastly, in terms of a skill set, I think that it's also a curious mind. And I'm sorry I'm looking more at soft stuff, but I'm realizing that we go to school and we learn all the hard stuff. And it's hard for us to even implement those hard things because we haven't trained our minds to think a certain way, right? So that curiosity. So how much reading are you doing on a daily basis? I have a stack of books this high. I promised myself, this month I'll read 2 books. I never get to it, right? But the truth is that as a PR professional, it's your bread and butter. Mm-hmm. Constantly reading, constantly being informed, constantly asking questions and interrogating things, right? Because after you've practiced PR for as long as some people have practiced it, and I'm going to allude to Mawuko and about you've practiced it for so long, so you realize that nothing is as it seems, right, on the face value. When you hear a story, you might think, oh, this is true, okay, and then you run with it. But if you were to take a few minutes and interrogate it or interrogate a situation, you realize that there's a whole engine behind it. So that curiosity, reading, understanding context, is definitely a skill set that you need to have as a PR professional, because that informs your strategy, informs how you treat your stakeholder universe, it informs how you even implement, right? So those would be the three things that I would think about.
Thank you, Akua. It's interesting that you point out to writing and reading as one of the important things when it comes to crisis management. Just to share, one of my bosses always told us that it's not, as a PR person, and let me maybe speak to my colleagues and the students here, it's really important that when you're writing, someone should not know that this is Emma's writing. Like, when you read, you get to know more vocabulary. You get to use different words. It shouldn't always be that when Emma writes, she'll use the word very good instead of better. She'll use the word XYZ instead of. So I think it helps you to deepen your understanding of what is being done. And I really like that you brought it up as a tool to crisis management.
I'll say a quick follow-up to that. You know, when I talked about being able to have a solution-driven mindset, it's also about decision-making, right? So in crisis, it's about how quickly you make a decision,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So once you practice that, you realize that you're able to make choices very quickly and recalibrate later if you have to.
Thank you. Does any of my panelists want to add anything on crisis management?
Yes, I do. Just 3 words.
Okay.
Preparation, preparation, preparation. And prepare for the unpreparable.
Preparation, preparation, preparation.
And prepared for the
Unpreparable.
The unexpected, the unusual. Because again, as our elders say, you never step into the same river twice.
True.
Even if it looks like a similar situation, if it has elements very similar to your last experience, trust me, the next one would have 10 centuries. So just be prepared.
All right. Thank you, Mawuko. Gayheart?
Inherent in preparation is anticipation. You should have very good anticipatory skills and be able to foretell when something is about to happen. And that requires a deeper understanding of the organization that you work with to be able to develop those anticipatory skills. It's also about a lot of self-control, because in crisis situation, as one of the lead managers, that is not the time to be panting. That is not the time to look clueless. And then also is empathy. Very critical when it comes to crisis situations, particularly when there are injuries or when there are fatalities. Empathy becomes critical. But you linked your question to COVID.
Yes.
And I would want to say that the PR profession came out with all fragrance around it during the COVID era. That is my assessment. Why do I say so? During COVID, PR, through organizations, offered a lot of hope and optimism to the countries within which organizations operate through their messaging. Messaging of organizations changed almost completely. And even behind the commercial messages were messages of hope and support. The other issue that stood out for us as PR professionals was the empathy that we offered. Empathy by way of support for the crisis in which we found ourselves in. All of a sudden, organizations that specialized in producing heavy equipment found themselves producing nose masks and other essentials required for the COVID era. We showed that in terms of relationship, particularly relationship with our customers, we valued those relationships as issues that were worth more than a mere transaction.
Yeah. Let me follow up with that, Gayheart, before I come to you, Deborah. You talked about anticipating. Sometimes with crisis situations, it's a bit difficult to anticipate. Let me give the most recent example. I'll turn it into maybe a case study, and my panelists can also help. Yesterday at the airport, Kotoka. I'm sure we've seen the incidents of the flying, the flying tool. So let's say this is a brand that you manage. You did not anticipate this situation. As the corporate communications manager, you've been asked to help handle this situation. How would you have solved it?
Okay, before I answer that one, of course it is not everything that can be anticipated. And that is why in today's PR practice, risk management is a key skill. You need to be able to look at your organization and identify the potential risk that can hit your organization and prepare for them. I'll give you a typical example. When I used to work with Vodafone, one of the issues that constituted risk, and which is still a risk, is the issue of SIM registration, okay? And if you look at the communications law, if the regulator identifies a number of SIMs on your network that are not properly registered, it comes with a heavy fine. This is not something that you sit and wait to happen. And that is where anticipation becomes very critical. You need to understand what is happening in the business and be able to prepare for it. Now back to the airport situation. Every situation requires a certain response to it. This was a situation of complete violence. If the video I saw is a video you are referring to.
Yes.
Here is an irate lady picking almost everything that she could lay her hands on and throwing it at the security people. What it calls for again here is cool heads. It calls for conversation. And then also it brings into focus one of the key skills of PR, which is listening. Did somebody listen to her? How did it get to that extent? If somebody had listened, and listening is not just hearing the sounds that somebody is making, it's understanding what has been said and being able to put an interpretation to it and giving the right feedback. And so good listening skills could have prevented the situation that we saw on the video. When the thing started flying, I will leave that to the security people to handle.
Deborah, would you like to add something?
Sure. So in addition to anticipation, Akua talked about getting knowledge. And Gayheart also emphasized the fact that when you step into an organization, one of the first things you need to do is to really understand the space you are in, the total business, because we go with the skill sets, the hard skills, the soft skills, but do you really understand your business? What could go wrong? And you have to look at the total business, looking at what could happen at any point. We anticipate risk and we anticipate crisis, but when you see actual crisis, they don't look the same. They are very, very different from what we anticipate, very different from what we plan for. And so the way we anticipate is also very important. I think that one thing that will help us to really jump into crisis and deal with the issues that crisis bring to public relations professionals is to get your talking points, your messaging, your everything that you need to manage a crisis ready, and keep them warm. Keeping them warm can be challenging because you've been anticipating, you've been planning, you have everything ready, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and no crisis, no issue. How do you continue to focus on it? Once you see what crisis can do to other organizations, that is the place to start learning, getting your things ready, keeping them warm, and actually simulating. You know, it is possible to simulate crisis. It is possible to simulate these things. So simulate it, get a team together, simulate crisis, and be able to help yourself, your team, and other stakeholders within the organization to plan appropriately. Because when crisis hits, it is very difficult to 15 minutes press release. It is really difficult. Sometimes you don't have 15 minutes, you have 5 minutes. And you have to think on your feet, you have to respond on the spot, you need to have your strategy together, and they need to be warm. Otherwise, when it happens, it's very difficult to pick them up. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me just continue from there, Deborah. Some of the things that you've mentioned, like thinking on your feet, means there are certain experiences you've gone through as a professional that have prepared you to get to the level that you are in the comms industry. So what are some of these experiences that maybe are not taught in class, you have to learn on the job, but they've really prepared you, they've channeled you, they've taught you that when it comes to such situations, when you're dealing with a client, when you're dealing with your colleague, you should be able to put them into play? What are some of these experiences?
It's very important. Planning is one of the things that we'll keep talking about. I'm sure we'll talk about it many times, planning, strategy, and all the things that we have to put together to be able to respond. Experiences also help us to get ready. So I have been through a crisis. I'm sure many of us know I have been through a crisis very recently. That has given me a lot of knowledge. I have learned on my feet. Sometimes you also are looking at stakeholder engagement. You're planning to engage a stakeholder, you have everything ready, and things do not go the way you plan them. How do you rewire, reorganize to quickly revise your strategy so that you can engage in a better way? These are things that we need to plan for. I have worked in various sectors, in the NGO sector, where you have to deal with communities, where you have to look at community behavior and help people to start modifying their behavior towards behavior change. How do you help people who have acquired a certain behavior over a long period of time to start modifying that behavior to behavior change? It requires you to be empathetic, but it also requires you to put yourself in the shoes of the people you are dealing with. When it comes to the media relations, there are a lot of things that we also do with media relations. We know that public relation is earned media, and we have advertising, which is really paid media. How do we engage our stakeholders within the media to be able to be our true advocates, so that when we need them to put this information that we critically need out there, we can do it? There are also new issues about new media. So social media is one of the things that is helping us as PR professionals to communicate. But it's also one of the things that is making our work very challenging. You wake up every day and you have new information in social media that is threatening your business and really testing your skills as a PR professional. And so you need to have this broad knowledge of the things that are around you. And recently we also know that there are global topics that are hitting at all of us. We have issues around sustainability that are very critical. We need to be up and doing, and we need to acquire new knowledge in this space. We have issues around sexual and gender minorities. Usually when it comes to our profession here in Ghana, when we're looking at gender balance and other things, these are easy things to discuss. But globally, there are discussions around sexual and gender minorities. How do you prep yourself to be able to deal with this? So broadly acquiring knowledge and be able to get things ready is very important, because once we are asked to think on the feet and deliver on our jobs, we need to be ready.
Thank you. Mawuko, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the same thing.
Again, let me try and go very basic. It sounds straight, it sounds very commonplace, but keeping calm, it's always an important one. Crisis, by definition, would make a lot of people around you very light, including very important stakeholders. So it's essential that in every difficult situation, the PR comms person becomes a stability bar. Keep calm. The other thing, which is also very basic, is that whatever the source of the stench or the angst, move away from it. So if there is something that has gone very wrong, move away from it. Own up, move away from it. The third basic one, which has been said and I associate with, is be relatable. Let people see a very genuine, honest issue, honest effort to address whatever the sources of the difficulties are. Keep it very basic. Yeah. And of course, underscoring all this would have been a lot of preparation. Because the truth of the matter is that once that something hits the fan, it's all muscle memory. You don't have time for deep reflections and things. It wouldn't happen. There's just too much happening around and too much chaos for you to be going into long meetings. So that is where the preparation kicks in, because now you are in the doing and in the muscle memory mode. I mean, if you have thousands of passengers stranded, as is happening in the airports now, it's difficult for you to be saying, this is exactly the space we are going to plan. You should have prepared, of course, you should have kept it very warm, and you just go into execution.
Yeah.
So keep it very simple. Thank you.
Okay. Gayheart, would you like to say something?
So it was also about skills that you were not taught in the classroom, which you've acquired over the years. I don't know whether you've heard of this concept of frenemies.
Yes.
PR never teaches frenemies. But frenemies is a concept that as PR practitioners, we need to get a grasp of. I mean, Mawuko he made a reference to it, relationships. And what do I mean by frenemies? I'll give you a typical example. I found myself in an organization, and there was a colleague director. I mean, you know how that thing goes. You meet somebody, you can tell, this person doesn't like you, okay? And then you also feel in yourself that I don't like this person. I mean, but here was a colleague director whose role was such that I did not have a choice, but I have to work with her department on almost a continuous basis. How am I going to scale this wall? This lady doesn't like me. I mean, there's something about her that I also don't like. I took in a deep thought and told myself, for my own sanity, and for your sanity as PR practitioners as well, and for your success, when you meet situations like this, you have no choice than to make your enemies your friends. And so I deliberately built a relationship with this lady. Deliberately. I'm telling you, by the time I left the organization, there were only a few people who did not believe that she wasn't my girlfriend. We were so close. We worked so close together. We spent Friday nights out, and that was all. There was nothing beyond that. So frenemies, you will never be taught. But bear in mind that the work of PR relies and depends upon so many people. PR profession is not a profession for turf war. It's a profession for relationship. It's a profession for working together. Frenemies, learn it.
Okay. So I was going to come to you, Akua.
So one of the experiences I have had is when there's a vacuum, it has to be filled. And so when you are in a crisis mode, whether you need to respond to the crisis or you don't need to respond to it. Mm-hmm. And if you have to respond, you need to respond quickly. Because when you don't tell your story, others will tell the story for you. And I'm sure that you've all had different experiences where something has happened, a brand or a business or a political organization or developmental agency needs to respond. There's been a lull. No one has said anything, and then social media kicks in with all the conspiracy theories. So by the time you get in to actually have a conversation, everybody else has told the story for you, and you are kind of on the back foot. And once you're on the back foot, you stay on the back foot for a very long time. I think that social media and digital is that double-edged sword that has been a very big tool for us as practitioners, but at the same time throws us a lot of curveballs. So I think for me is if you have a story, tell it and tell it yourself, and don't leave space for others to tell your story for you.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to our panelists, but I also want to open up the floor for any questions, comments towards the panelists or towards the discussion. Please feel free. There are 2 standing microphones in the middle. You can approach one, just introduce yourself, and then you can direct your question to a specific panelist, or you can give your comment. Yes.
Good morning.
Good
I'm
morning.
Michael Zambo, a final year student at the Ghana Institute of Journalism. I want to ask a question, taking it from where Akua just ended, on digitization and its effects on the practice of public. We all realize that with the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to go back home using digital tools, working from home and all those things. What is the impact of digitization on the practice of public relations, and how should entry-level professionals adjust to this new reality? Thank you.
This is where I left off. Can I put a spin on your question and not look at it just for entry-level professionals and just look at it from professionals generally? The first thing for me when I think about, and I called it a double-edged sword, right, is the fact that there are so many formats today, right, content formats, and different platforms have different users. So if you take a persona like me, maybe on Facebook I'm a motivational speaker. On Twitter I am a politician. When you go to Instagram, I'm a mother with children and I'm this, I've got it all together. When you go on LinkedIn, I'm a professional. So I think the first thing is just understanding how digital and social platforms can be used differently when it comes into the world of PR. Unfortunately, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Twitter is a disaster. It's gangster, let me put it that way. Not everybody can live on Twitter. So I have clients, and this client, I'm like, you are gentle, please, we will not do Twitter. Because you can be savaged on Twitter for no reason, right? So I think the first thing for me is just understanding the various platforms, how they work, what personas live there, how messaging is broken down on those platforms as one thing. So that would be the first thing. The second thing for me is the fact that there are so many content formats today. And so, whereas before our press release was just a press release that you put out, I could take one press release and put it out on social platforms in multiple fashions, right? It could go as short video content, which is 10-second videos. It could go in as stories. It could go in as a post. It could go in as a carousel. It could go in as static content. There's so many ways, right? So it's understanding those content formats as well and understanding how do I use those formats to tell my story in a multifaceted fashion, right? So I could take that story and say, okay, I'm doing, let's say a brand launch. I want to profile my people here. I would like to share product information on this platform. So it's understanding that. The last thing for me as a practitioner is understanding that in as much as it's a tool for communicating, for dissemination of information, for putting your message out there, it's also a weapon. And it's a weapon when it's in someone else's hands in order to devastate you as an individual brand or as a corporate brand. And understanding that once something is set ablaze on social, it's very, very difficult to manage. So constantly listening. So that's why you do things like social listening, so that you know what messages. So as soon as something comes up, it's picked up very, very quickly, and then you can respond to it. But understanding, and it goes back to the conversations of having a crisis matrix, right, and anticipating and all of that. So understanding that social is really great, but it's also that thing that can kind of set your brand ablaze in 1 minute and this kind of, and there are lots of lies that are told. I'm sure all of us saw that, I think about a year or two ago, I think it was Ronaldo who had picked up water instead of a Coca-Cola. And everybody was of the view that, oh, that's why the Coca-Cola share price fell. The share price was already falling before that, right? But we all believed it. So understanding that perception is reality in social, and how do you manage? You can't control it. How do you prepare, anticipate, and manage that?
Thank you, Akua. Another question? Yes, you can just approach the microphone.
Good morning, everybody. Pardon me for my husky voice. My question goes to, I'm Joseph Okuaji, a student of the University of Professional Studies, Accra, the Department of Communication Studies. My question goes to Auntie Deborah Kwablah. You made mention of your recent crisis. I mean, most of us got to know about it, and I want to ask actually, how do you go about it? I mean, we saw the press releases on our socials, but what went into the preparation stage, coordinating your various stakeholders to be able to get over the crisis? Thank you.
Thank you. So I mentioned a lot of preparation. I mentioned keeping your messaging warm. I also mentioned simulation. So these are things that we do on a daily basis. However, when you see the real crisis, they don't look the same. And so you take some very quick decisions at the beginning. You look at the crisis, where is it coming from? How is it progressing? Is it on social media? Is it on traditional media? Are you receiving calls at your call center reporting similar issues? So you do a quick analysis of the crisis that is at hand. And then you put a plan together very quickly. You don't have time. So if you have a plan that is warm, lucky you take it and you execute it. If you don't have a warm plan, you quickly have to pick an old one and dust it up. Very important decision to take at this point. Do you respond? Akua mentioned, are you going to respond? And if you are going to respond, what is your message? When? Speed is of essence. If you are not going to respond, what are you going to do to mitigate? Okay, so these are all strategies that we deployed. Very early in December, when we saw things picking up, we put out a press release, yes. So the strategy was use the most, if you like, formal way of communicating. We picked press release as the way to communicate. And so the press release was there. The issue were escalating on social media. We decided to respond to consumers who had issues with the products, and so quickly responding to the concerns of consumers and really addressing the issue. Some consumers are in the midst of a situation like we had, are very angry, and so how do you empathize? How do you keep them calm? And how do you get the whole team to be activated so that they can respond to this very important need of consumers? Consumers make the business. We are a food and beverage company. And so our consumers are very dear and very strategic to the business. So if they have issues, you have an issue. So responding to the needs of consumers, informing the public at the right time with the right information. And so we made sure that we put out the right information at the right time. So the press releases were intermittent. We put out about 4 press releases. There was a lot of pressure from within, from external, to start speaking very quickly on the issue. But what is important in managing a crisis like we did is to take some very firm decisions. So are you speaking, are you not? And we decided not to speak. We decided to use press releases to communicate. We decided to really address the concern of the people who had the issue, so the consumers. And so that is how we focused on it. And we also looked within. What are some of the structures that we need to put in place to, one, quickly resolve the issue and come back and move on? But more importantly, how do we prevent an issue like this from coming again? Basically that is it. Preparation, keep things warm, take quick decisions, and go with your decisions. Once you decide not to communicate, the pressure should not push you because you know what strategy you are implementing. And if you decide to do it, you do it very quickly. And then you go to the root of the problem, deal with the issues, and then you move on.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can I just add something quickly? And let me preface it by saying that, look, PR practice has different emphasis depending upon the industry in which you are practicing, okay? And so to add to what she's saying, there are organizations that have crisis management room standing. It is there. And when you go into that crisis management room or office, there are chairs and labeled chairs on the table. PR person, works manager, factory hand, whatever, that is a sitting place. And those are the members that constitute the PR team, okay? In addition to that, there are templates that have been prepared. And there is a crisis management manual. When you take that manual, different possible crisis scenarios have been simulated and press releases written for all those scenarios. So the most potential crisis situations have been anticipated and preparations have been made. If you are, for want of a better word, lucky, and one of those crises happen, you only take the template and update it. Makes it very easy for you. And it's not just a template on press release, it's also a template on what you are writing to tell somebody's parent that a child is not coming back home because of the accident, somebody's wife has to be rushed to the hospital. All those communications have been written. And so that is how it is prepared in some organizations. There are other organizations that will only go through an exercise and sit and wait for it to happen, and then that is when they start putting some of these things together. And so it differs. But best practice, prepare, anticipate, put the templates together so that when you are hit by crisis, you are not now going to think in that mood, but you have something that you would follow and just update.
Thank you very much, Gayheart. We'll take 2 more questions and then the panelists will close. Yes.
Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Isaac Ejekwachi, Webster University. Mine has to do with reliable information. 3 days ago at the UN Security Council, the Secretary General stated, and I want to quote, "Information is a human right," or access to information is a human right. And I'm happy the Honorable Deputy Minister spoke about the passage of the law. And I wish she's there to answer this question. The introduction of e-levy and its hula balloons. After its passage, then we realized the Minister of Finance is doing public education. So I asked myself, what prevented the ministry from informing Ghanaian people first before introducing the thing in Parliament? So I wish the Honorable Minister could, as it were, because if we've had the information prior notice on it before its introduction, probably the back and forth would have been avoided. And I like the issue Akua raised about when you're on the back foot, catching up is very, very difficult, especially when you are starting a 100-meter race and you don't start early or well, you end up being late. And that is the reason why we are seeing what the sufferings of e-levy. In as much as it's a good idea, but I don't know, Honorable Minister, why did we not get to the Ghanaian people first? That is, for me, it's a communication setback. And I think that reliable information is key to the success of every organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the question. I think it's a very important question. And it will be a case study based on what all the panelists have said about anticipation. You know, when it comes to government communication, we have targets. For instance, if you look at the e-levy, one will say that it is not the first or only tax or levy that has been introduced in any budget. What you do is that before introducing the levy or any other government policy, you anticipate. You look at your stakeholders. At what level do you engage? Are they engagements that are based on representation, or you escalate it to a national engagement? So most of the decisions are taken based on anticipation. And some of the engagements may be done closed doors, that you may not be in the position to know that they have happened. So it depends on such engagements, and at the time of implementation, you realize that, okay, this ought to be escalated because the way we have carried the information, maybe it has not gone down or through third parties. For instance, even in Parliament, you want to introduce something of that sort, you engage the relevant committees in Parliament. These are, the committee members are MPs. Sometimes it goes to the plenary. You anticipate that, let me meet these stakeholders within the financial sector. Let's meet these stakeholders, TUC and the rest. Let's meet organized labor. You will think that these engagements will eventually translate to the level of understanding and cooperation you require from the general public. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if you are a PR practitioner, especially in the political space, which is very much polarized, you do your calculations. When they don't go as planned, you should be strong enough to make the relevant detours or the relevant escalations. So sometimes you anticipate, as Mr. Gayheart, Mensah mentioned that we have templates. The templates don't always work. But when they don't, you quickly need to take the next steps. So when you remember that the draft bill was first sent to Parliament, the engagement went on. People did not really get the essence of that draft bill. It was taken out of Parliament. For us to do further engagement, public engagement, quite apart from the stakeholder engagements, in terms of town hall meetings and also streaming those town hall meetings live, to get more public buy-in. And then the bill was still sent back to Parliament. Even with the passage of the bill, we still need to pursue more PR strategies, even till today, as the implementation is ongoing. So as I mentioned, anticipation is crucial. Sometimes you are spot on with your anticipation. Sometimes other circumstances that are not really core to the issue may come in, COVID, other things, inflation, other things may come in, even politics, even political propaganda. Other things may be dragging all your efforts, and you need to come back and take a decision whether to escalate what you have already put in place. Sometimes too, you do over communication. You do so much and realize that, you know what, it is too much. Let us de-escalate. Let us take out some of the strategies that have already been laid out. So it is not that with respect to e-levy, there were no engagements, but based on our anticipation, the engagements that were done did not seem to satisfy what was required at that point in time. And there was the need for escalation. So we took the bill back and then did that further engagement before sending it back to Parliament. So for those who were key stakeholders, they were aware that engagements were done. But when they don't succeed, you should be quick in applying your escalation efforts or further steps to make sure your intended policy gains that public confidence and approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll take one last question. Okay, sorry, Mawuko wants to say something?
Yes, one small contribution. PR is not magic. PR is not magic. PR is not throwing your hands into the air and all problems go away. That is not PR. There are certain circumstances and situations that require solutions outside the realm of PR. And PR cannot float and gloat over that. That's my contribution.
Okay, that's a very good tweet. PR is not magic. Mawuko Afadzinu. Hashtag Wild PR Day with GMA. Thank you, Mawuko. You can go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. My name is A.Y. Kuono. Three things gladden my heart this morning. The first is that we are seated here to celebrate World PR Day. Only means that we have managed to come this far to gain some global recognition as a profession or a professional body. And so for me, I think it's a milestone worth, celebrating, and I'm glad about that. The second thing that gladdens my heart the most is that of the 4 panelists we have, well, maybe they are lawyers in their side business, but I'm glad to know that they are not core lawyers. And I say this because in a lot of organizations, lawyers have been deemed to be the right people to drive the communication external engagement, external affairs, and PR machinery. But it gladdens me to know that the professionals seated here are not core lawyers, but they are PR professionals. And so again, it lends credence to the trade that we are applying. And along with that is my question. I thought we would be speaking about the changing skill sets for the entire profession. It appears so far the conversation has been focused largely on crisis communication, which I recognize to be an aspect of PR. So for the entire profession, what should be the key changing skill sets? And some of those that you have already outlined, I recognize those, but to bring us or to give us a seat at the table. And I'm saying this also because in a lot of organizations, there's the concept of core business. So this organization is a telecom company. And so our core business is telecom. And so in that regard, PR is perceived to be a support function and usually relegated, right? Again, because we are celebrating World PR Day, I'm glad that there's some recognition coming up. But for the profession as a whole, how should we position ourselves to be able to have a say at the topmost level? What kinds of skill sets do we require to achieve that? The final thing that gladdens my heart is the fact that we have a lot of students here who are aspiring to pursue the profession. So what would you say to them in one word that they should do or they should, get to become relevant and to actually make an impact in the chosen profession? Thank you.
Thank you so much. The gentleman has taken my job for the day, but that's fantastic. I love when we share roles. But yes, I would actually like all the panelists to answer those questions. I think we've spoken about certain skill sets that we're using now, we've been using, but what about the PR for the future? What kind of skill sets do we need? And then finally, what word of advice would you give to the students, the professionals here who are practicing public relations? And then we can close. So in any particular order.
Okay. So the first one for me will be around influencer marketing. Even if you take 5 years ago, our influencer conversations were built around celebrities. Right now, you'll find a 25-year-old who has a following of 500,000 people, and they're having conversations about youth employment, needlework, cooking, all sorts of varied conversations. And you'll be amazed the amount of power that 25-year-old has on the phone. And people are learning it as a skill and as a role today. And so as PR professionals, I am of the view that even as you're building the brands and you're managing the stories and so on, it's important to understand how influencer marketing works. So I, for example, has built a practice called the Influence Practice. And it's a big global thing that's happening all around the world, where you're understanding how do you use influencers as a support system within the PR ecosystem. So that's the first thing for me. The second thing for me is, as PR professionals, beginning to also be part of impact frameworks and also how sustainability projects work. So we've always said CSR. CSR is just something that you slap at the end of, you're mining in Bogoso, so you want to make sure that the roads in Bogoso are well, there are hospitals there, people are well cared for, and so on and so forth. And a lot of the time, it's a result of some level of tokenism, right? Because you're making millions. But at the end of the day, we realize a lot of brands have migrated a lot more to building sustainable efforts, whether it's around water, whether it's environmental, all these environmental issues that are coming up. So within the PR practice, it's one of the things that sometimes, it straddles PR, it straddles legal, it straddles so many different bits in the organization. But I think that as PR practitioners, we also need to begin to think about sustainability. You don't come in at the end of a project where you've done a sustainable development project and then say, we're coming to evaluate it. Working with the various teams to make sure that from the beginning to the end, you are measuring, you're seeing how is this working, how is this impacting the relationships that my fellow panelists talked about from the beginning, whether it's relationships with consumers, relationship with various stakeholders across the value chain. So those will be the two areas I think we need to begin to build. And I'm trying to talk about things that we don't do currently today a lot of, but it's around influencer and then also driving impact within our industry.
Yeah. And then just Akua, what word of advice would you give to PR students who are here about practicing PR, or even the professionals? What's your final take as advice?
You've made the right choice. We all want to be doctors, we all want to be lawyers, we all want to be, accountants, and so many other professions. And not that many people go into PR. So you have made the right choice. I think that the main thing is develop yourself constantly. That would be my phrase of advice, constant development.
Thank you.
I would say project management is becoming a core function of PR professionals, because depending on the organization that you work for, your portfolio could be as wide as from internal comms to external relations, media, and then plus more, including sustainability. So learning how to manage full-scale projects from concept to the full implementation to post-evaluation is very important. Akua mentioned sustainability. That has become a core PR function. And so for us in Nestle, we do not do philanthropy. What we do is creating shared value. I mean, it's our version of corporate social responsibility. So what is creating shared value? We believe that when we create shared value as a business, we are more sustainable. So let me give you one example. So we use maize in the production of Cerelac. And so ensuring that the supply keeps coming and to fuel the production and getting the quality that you need for the production of baby food is very important to us. And so we support maize farmers with inputs, with agronomy practices, with harvesting, post-harvest transportation, cleaning, and other things, because this fuels our business and it will make our business sustainable. So that's how we look at projects, creating shared value, closely linked to sustainability. Today, the world is talking about emission of gases. We are talking about CO2, we are talking about global warming, and industry is taking the heat for a lot of these things that are happening to our world. So how can you, as a key industry player, be relevant? We have been working in Ghana for about 64 years. And I like to say that we'll be here another 64 and counting, because globally we are over 164 years old. And so we are a very sustainable business, and we've done this over the years because we have integrated sustainability as part of our business. And so this is an area that as upcoming professionals, or as professionals, let's start looking at these areas. Sustainability in the space that you operate, in the business that you are in. What are the things that help the business to be sustainable? So the gentleman who spoke, sorry I didn't get your name, talked about PR as a support function. In some organizations, PR is a core function. You are a true business partner, because without you, the vehicle that moves for the organization to operate cannot, okay? So it's not every organization that PR people are support functions. Some organizations, PR people are true business partners. So we need to start nurturing the role that we play as professionals to become true business partners. Our value must be felt. So how do you make yourself relevant? How do you make sure you add value? And at the beginning, Gayheart talked about bottom line. So if the work that you do makes the business more profitable, the work that you do makes the business more sustainable, you become a true business partner rather than a support function. Today we are also we are in a world where we are talking about diversity and inclusion. It looks far away, but it's very close to us, because for you to do the right communication, get the right stakeholders, manage your stakeholders the best way possible to build long-term institutional partnerships, you need to understand the topic of diversity and inclusion. I mentioned earlier that there are issues of, we talk about gender balance very easily, but now when it comes to gender and sexual minorities, we talk very little about it. And Akua mentioned that learning. So learning in spaces that are beyond and above what we practice as professionals is very important. Sustainability is our baby now. Diversity and inclusion is becoming our baby. Project management is becoming our core function. And yes, we are not lawyers, but putting the right information out there so that you don't get trouble, you don't get negative publicity for your organization is very important, so that we can continue to build trust.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Just because of the criticality of sustainability to PR practice today, I will touch on it again, okay? I believe you've heard about the concept of triple bottom line. And those who deliver the triple bottom line are more of PR practitioners than mainstream workers. What is our impact on society? It's a PR function. What's our impact on the environment? It's a PR function. And so that is how important sustainability is to the practice of PR as a new concept. And so clearly PR has moved significantly from media relations, publicity, writing articles, writing speeches, into such concepts as purpose. I believe you've heard about purpose-driven organization. Purpose-driven organization, it is our responsibility to lead organization. What is it that the organization does over and beyond its services and products and delivering value and profitability? So yes, organizations sell products, they deliver service, they deliver shareholder value to those who have invested in the organization. But what do you exist to do over and beyond that? Mm-hmm. I can only use an example, let's say MTN, for instance. MTN purpose can be to connect people everywhere. So they are selling SIM cards, they are selling credits, they are making profits. But their purpose probably is to ensure connectivity for people to be able to have a chat, converse, and conduct their business. That is purpose. And it is one of the skill sets identifying and managing purpose that we need to look at as PR practitioners. There is also the concept of advocacy. It is at the center of what we do. And again, depending upon the industry in which you find yourself, you will end up doing a lot more advocacy or a lot more media relations. And what's advocacy? Understand where your organization is headed for. Know what is happening in the broad picture that could impact on what your organization is doing by way of policy, regulations, trends, and be able to develop a position that positions your organization to either benefit from what is happening in the country, what the trends are, or to be able to make an intervention that will again inure to the purpose and objectives of your organization. That is what advocacy is about. Then there is also social performance. How are you as an organization impacting on society? And so you should understand what social performance is and how even to measure social impacts. Stakeholder management. Well, we used to call it public relations or public management, but stakeholder management, another very key area. So when we talk about public relations, the trends are changing. Trust never featured when it came to public relations. And when we talk about trust, it's not just about trust between you and the customer or between you and your stakeholders. It's also the level of trust that you are able to build and generate as a professional within your organization. And that is why today PR practitioners are called trusted advisors. And if you are able to position yourself that way, you would realize the kinds of conversations that, for instance, your CEO would have with you, and you would wonder, where is this coming from? But when you analyze all that, you would come to realize that that trust is needed in order to manage the brand or the image and reputation of the organization that you work for. There are a few others. I'll leave them for Mawuko.
Thank you very much, Gayheart. Maybe pretty soon I will start, inspired by this question, I'll start a blog, the letter to my young friend in PR. Maybe, just maybe. It's that simple question that requires a very simple answer, in my estimation. See, wherever you get into as a PR person, there are two things. Number one, make sure you know and understand what is important to the organization. You know and you understand what is important to the organization. Number two, make sure you are deep and thorough in your craft as a PR person. And you bring the two together. You apply your craft to the benefit of what is important for the organization. Very simple. It goes a little deeper. Now, if you are in this generation, and I know this is not the kind of place where you start talking about analytics and data, because as communicators, typically, we shy away from it. But our world is now driven by insights and data. Insights come to us a bit more naturally because we tend to be a bit more perspective inclined, but we have to go deeper than that. And now in our world, data, getting the right data points, applying them to improve the quality of your delivery to your organization for the benefit of the people you relate with has become an imperative. So please, for those of you who don't like arithmetic, start liking it small, 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 because you need it to perform at the highest levels and to keep your seat. No, not just keep your seat, but to be on the head seat in charge of your organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I just add a few quickly?
Yeah.
Strategy development. You can't be a PR person if you cannot develop and implement strategy. Storytelling. How do you tell the story of your organization? How do you tell the story of the people in your organization? Also extremely critical. And then you asked us to give advice to PR practitioners. And look, I consider leaders, and particularly political leaders, to be largely engaged in several aspects of public relations. And so my advice is to PR practitioners, as it is to leaders and political leaders as well. And particularly for political leaders, I think, and I'm looking at my honorable minister now, I think it is high time politicians in this country start adopting truth, trust, and transparency in the conduct of the affairs of this country. If we had applied truth, trust, and transparency, we wouldn't have had the challenge that we had with e-levy. If we had applied the 3 T's, the unending debate about where we are as an economy and how we got there wouldn't have come up. Truth, trust, and transparency will have helped us to build that consensus that I believe the current architecture of the political structure of this country today requires. And when I talk about the architecture of the political structure, I'm talking about, for instance, the hung parliament that we have. It's a situation that requires openness. It's a situation that requires mutual trust. And if we are able to do that, we will be able to move this country forward in truth, trust, and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gayheart. And allow me to thank all the panelists, Mawuko, Gayheart, Akua, and Deborah, for joining us today. I'm sure a lot of us wanted to ask some questions. They'll still be here. You can network with them. It's also a networking event. Please feel free to approach them and speak to them. Thank you very much, again, for all of you for listening. For all my colleagues in the industry, truth, trust, and transparency. Happy World PR Day. Let's ensure that we are doing everything that is possible to ensure that our profession, people are aware about what we do. We're not magicians, we're not spin doctors, we don't tell lies, we do our roles well. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Okay, so I don't want to take the panelists off the stage yet, so allow me to call Mr. Boateng. There's a small presentation we want to do for the panelists before they leave the stage. Just to say thank you, from Global Media Alliance for joining us today. We are truly honored and we valued your time that you spent with us. So Mr. Boateng, if you can join us on stage and then help us. Okay, so the first one will be to Deborah. Thank you very much, Deborah. The next one is to Akua. Our good friend, Mr. Mawuko. And Gayheart. Thank you very much to our panelists. Mr. Boateng, before you leave, allow me to call Honorable Deputy Minister. We don't take it for granted that you joined us today as well, and we just have a small something to also say thank you for gracing our occasion, accepting our invitation, and joining us today. This is from Global Media Alliance, ma'am, to you. May I kindly request that we all take a group picture, then we have our seats. Okay. Yeah. Yes, we are. Okay, there's one more. Okay, thank you very much. Mrs. T, over to you.
Thank you all. We are so grateful that you're still here, giving of your time and your resources as well. We'd like to say a very big thank you to people who have come from various organizations to ensure that World PR Day is a success in Ghana. And we cannot let you take leave of us without acknowledging your presence. So please, we are going to clap for them when all the names have been mentioned. So I'll mention the names through, and then the final one, we put our hands together for all of them. So we have reps from Mahogany Consult, Webster University, Ghana Journalists Association, Food and Drug Authority, Advertisers Association of Ghana, University of Professional Studies, Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, African University College of Communication, Academic City College, Pentecost University, University of Ghana, University of Ghana Medical Center, Institute of Public Relations Ghana, Touchpoint Magna Carta, Chartered Institute of Marketing Ghana, Samsung, Ghana Standards Authority, Social Ghana, Rwand Air, State Interest and Governance Authority, Ghana Tourism Authority, Digicraft Brand Solutions, Women in PR, UNESCO, Wisconsin International University College, Trust Hospital. Please, let's put our hands together for all these organizations. Goes a long way to show that we are ready to ensure that PR is incorporated when it comes to national discourse. And by the time we get to meet next year, we are looking forward to having a different story, how we've been involved in the national discourse. So once again, we want to say a very big thank you to everyone represented here. We have a light refreshment to my right. We want each and every one of us to please enjoy it. And remember that World PR Day has been made a success because you came and because you're going to continue to tell the story around public relations. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's put our hands together for ourselves. My name is Eunice Tony. I'm a PR practitioner for Global Media Alliance and also the host of ETV Ghana's African Women's Voices Show. See you next year.